Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night, it is your boy, the Horrorlander. I am back once again with a new type of video up on my channel for a video series that's basically going to be me talking about my top favorite horror short stories that I've read within certain periods of time. Basically, I'm making this type of video because these are during points of my life where essentially I'm too busy to be reading full-length novels or be diving into very detailed reviews of longer media, especially with my last college semester running right now and me having very little free time at the moment. So I do have the time to be getting into horror short stories though, specifically because I'm not reading at times full-length short story collections. Sometimes I just like picking and choosing certain short stories from anthology collections or other places to give a read, because I'll typically see that people recommend certain short stories over the other, or there might be some short stories from some of my favorite authors or ones that I'm intrigued by that are basically solo stories featured within other people's anthology collections that they edit. So this is sort of the focus for this new video series on my channel. I'm going to be giving you guys short stories from various different books, various different places that I've been reading, and these are ones that basically stand out to me. Now, spoiler alert, the ones for this video, the 5 short stories, 4 of them come from the same author, who is one of my favorite new horror authors, which you guys pretty much must know of, being Mr. Tim Curran. Now, I've been obsessed with reading a bunch of his different stuff, and of course, he has a bunch of horror short stories that are featured in other people's anthology book collections or even magazines that are very obscure and hard to find. So I'm trying my best to kind of find his stuff. I also have another horror short story which basically got recommended to me by another fellow reviewer friend of mine, Michael, who has multiple channels such as Michael Goosebumps Fan, Night of the Living Dude, where he makes horror movie reviews, but specifically on his channel called Mr. Wildboy 94, he had recommended to me a short story by Bentley to definitely go check out. So that's why I decided to give it a read. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the 5 short stories that I'll be covering. And without further ado, hopefully you guys check out some of this stuff after I convince you guys with these very intense plots and overall very memorable moments within them. The first story I'll be getting into is sort of lower on the totem pole, so I kind of want to get it out of the way. This was a story that I found pretty good, but the concept is very memorable, it's very strange, but it fits the vibe of a schlocky, weird story with some deeper kind of moral messages behind it, and it's got that holiday flair because it is in a festive setting, because it's a Christmas horror story, and this is one by Tim Curran called In the Bag. You can find this horror short story in an anthology book called, I believe, Collected Christmas Horror Shorts. I'll post the book cover in the corner here so you guys can take a look at it. But this one was a single short story by Tim Curran that was featured in the book, so I decided to give it a read. This one is basically about an old, scarred-up homeless man walking through the streets during Christmas Eve. It's snowing, it's cold, there's a blizzard outside, and of course he's walking around with this little shopping cart. He's got this big bag in there where it's basically hinted that he's giving out Christmas presents to the other homeless people that are on the streets, the other drug, crackhead junkies that are sort of down on their luck, abandoned by life, have mental disorders and other things. He's sort of trying to bring them some Christmas joy and festive feelings to people who basically never get that sort of feeling with their current situation. You then have him start encountering some other people. He encounters a shop owner who shows him some festive Christmas spirit, giving him some free food, and eventually he starts running into the various different people that are sort of the familiar crackheads, junkies, and down on the luck homeless people around this city. One of them is this very basically gone out of her mind, dementia-filled old woman who lives inside of a fridge, and she's disgusting, dirty, has nobody that she can go to, and he basically kind of tells her to, come over to the shopping cart and grab a gift because he's giving out gifts through this sack to all the different homeless people around the city. And when she ends up going to this giant brown sack, all of a sudden it opens up, and you see that it is filled with razor-sharp giant teeth and the bottom of the sack seems to be endless, filled with pink, human-like gums. It leaps out like a python, swallows her, chomps her in half, and scarfs her down. And that's when you realize the more sinister festivities that are going around with this homeless man, because you come to know that this bag and him might have encountered each other in the past, and there is some Lovecraftian nods in terms of what this bag is, what are its capabilities, what's its relationship with the man. He had found it in a ruined abandoned church, and now every single Christmas he goes around and uses it to essentially relieve down on the luck homeless people, crackheads, junkies from their eternal suffering. Which involves this very horrific and morbid method. And you see how that plays out with the rest of this short story and some more details about what this bag exactly entails every single Christmas Eve and Christmas Day that comes around. That one was a pretty good short story. Again, it's a more schlocky, weird concept. I feel like some of you guys who read it might enjoy it more. It's definitely memorable and iconic, but overall it felt pretty short and to the point, so I can't give it really more than a 7.5 out of 10. But I suggest you go check it out and read it. It'll definitely be a fun read for you during the Christmas time, and I'm sure that you won't forget it. And I definitely think that this could have been something adapted into like a Creepshow movie back in the day. It's got that Creepshow movie segment vibe. The next story is actually the one that got recommended to me by Mr. Wildboy94 Michael. This one is a story by Bentley Little called The Washingtonians. The Washingtonians you can find in Bentley Little's short story collection, aptly called The Collection. This one is a very wild, crazy tale. It's basically about this man who has ended up inheriting some items from his grandma. His grandma had a lot of like antique vintage items that she kept in her barn. And one of the things that he inherited was this very old piece of like parchment paper that is a historical document. But this historical document basically might end up changing the course of history, specifically American history as we know it. And this is in an extremely bad way, because on this parchment paper is essentially a historical document signed by George Washington. That's right, the American hero, the founding father, the first president. And on this paper, George Washington is basically saying, in an unknown circumstance, that I will skin your children alive and eat them, and fasten their bones as utensils. With this statement then brought to sort of like your typical pawn shop, historical type of verification person, this guy basically tells the man that this is a valid document. This is in fact George Washington's writing, and it basically might reveal that George Washington was in fact a cannibal. And the other founding fathers and the people who followed George Washington may have been participating in some very morbid, very horrific, and very disturbing festivities back in the day, which were all hidden under the rug. You then get this shocking reveal, and now the man is basically put up with this moral dilemma because the pawn shop verification owner basically tells him that, yeah, you can submit this to the Smithsonian, get some money, get some kind of fame behind it, but just know that this is going to be a very powerful piece of document, and the government and political figures and other figures at hand might know about this information and are probably hiding it on purpose. So you might face some repercussions that you're not ready to handle. With that ominous warning, the man basically drives home to his family. He's got that parchment paper next to him, and it's very funny because as he's driving down basically his suburb or town, he's seeing signs of like George Washington in certain stores, restaurants, places, and he gets this very creepy, eerie feeling because now he can't look at George Washington the same way after finding out that this was a valid document. And that's when you start to reveal that there are some figures who kind of want to hide this information. The rabbit hole that goes down in terms of how deep this whole covering up this situation runs is more than you might expect. And the man is definitely not ready for it. Neither is his family. And you see how it plays out with this very over-the-top comical story with very creepy and eerie undertones. This one really got under my skin despite the wild concept, because just the idea of like history as you know it being wrong and these very morbid, creepy things involving like, you know, in this case, cannibalism and cults, behind the scenes was very disturbing. You know, that idea of like these hidden secrets and conspiracies turning out to be real is sort of creepy to me. Kind of hits home and probably hits home to a lot of people out there in terms of the real world. And having it with George Washington was pretty comical, pretty fun, but at the same time creepy. And some of the visual scenes that you get within this short story and that initial sort of setup involving the document was pretty damn good. But overall, I'd give this one a 9 out of 10. It's a great story, and I definitely recommend you guys go check it out. And I believe it got adapted into an anthology horror TV show called Masters of Horror, I believe. So I gotta go check that out in the future. So thank you, Mr. Wildboy94 Michael, my homie, my best friend, good friend, and also a inspiration for me creating my channel. I appreciate this recommendation, and yeah, it was worth the read. Now we're back to Tim Curran again, of course, the GOAT that I'm always repping. I know some of you guys might be like, damn, you're reading so much Tim Curran, but the type of writing he does, the type of stories that he does, just hit home to me. They're all amazing. I've spoken about why I love his stories in the previous Tim Curran reviews that I did, so you can get an idea as to why I sort of champion the guy. And he's not as famous as a lot of other horror authors, and I believe he should be. So I'm going to be the guy who kind of champions some of his work. So without further ado, the next story up here is called Mr. Mumblety-Peg from the book Eulogies 3. Mr. Mumblety-Peg basically opens up with a woman who you find out to be a mother who wakes up from a nap, and she's basically waiting for her husband to come home from work and her 2 kids, a son and a daughter, coming home from school. So she starts to walk down in her house and go to her kitchen to prepare dinner. And when she gets down to the kitchen, she smells a very powerful, pungent, kind of burning smell, a sulfurous smell. And she believes that something may be burning down in her house. She starts to panic and tension starts to rise. But then there's this very disgusting, sort of nasty undertone to the smell, which sounds like a burning, rotting corpse. And that's when she starts to get slightly concerned. And then she starts to hear a noise out in her living room. She walks out of her kitchen and gets to the living room, and that's when she sees a stranger basically sitting in her living room and looking at her children and family's photos. He's a tall, old man. He looks anorexic looking, very skinny, looks starved with pale skin, gray hair, and he's got this very sort of shark skin, leather, smooth black suit that he's wearing. And she realizes that that disgusting, burning, sulfurous smell with that undertone of a dead corpse is coming from him. And she starts to get this really ominous, bad feeling. That's when the man basically starts having this very sort of over-the-top Willy Wonka, Beetlejuice kind of personality, where he starts announcing some very crazy things, basically starts acting like he belongs in this house, and starts warning her that, yeah, don't bother calling the police, nobody's gonna believe you, it's not worth the effort, just hear me out on my propagation, on my contract that I want to make with you, but let's just get to the chase. I want to eat one of your children. Yeah, this motherfucker is straight crazy. He basically offers to her that he wants to eat one of her kids, and he's going to let her decide which kid that she wants him to eat, because if she does not honor this and do this for him, he basically tells her this ominous foreshadowing that her family members are going to start dying in horrific ways. You know, her daughter is going to end up in a very bad situation. Her father is going to basically, well, husband in this case, is going to have a tragic fate basically waiting for him. So he's sort of doing this ominous fortune telling. She thinks that it's not going to come true, but then all of a sudden as she's standing, she right away in a matter of like an instant ends up sitting on the couch. And you basically start to find out that as this guy spawns a cooking book where he starts reading out various different recipes to cook with kids, that he might be a demonic figure. He might be some type of supernatural entity, and he in fact has reality warping powers to an unknown degree. And that's when she starts realizing that, holy shit, I am in a much worse situation than I expected. And she eventually panics and starts to run outside, and that's when she starts seeing some very horrific sights. She starts seeing that her entire neighborhood might be getting affected by this guy, that people are getting warped in very horrific ways, and people that she tries to rely on end up getting into some very horrible circumstances at the hands of this man who simply calls himself Mr. Mumblety-Peg. how the story unfolds. What are these exactly horrible things that are happening around the neighborhood? What are these horrible things that are happening to people? And what is her fate? And what is this guy exactly going to do and plan? Well, that stuff I can't spoil for you because it is a short story. But if you want to go check it out, I definitely recommend it. I give this one an 8.5 out of 10. It is a very good story. You can find it again in the anthology collection called Eulogies 3. And this one is basically an R-rated version of Beetlejuice. And I thought that was so fun, just getting this demonic supernatural figure with this sort of whimsical, malicious, very sinister personality. There's some specific lines that he drops that are very funny and morbid, which are escaping my mind right now, but I remember reading them and laughing out loud and thinking that this guy made such a great villain. His reality warping powers are terrifying, and he's even able to like manipulate his body and manipulate other sort of settings and circumstances in disturbing and scary ways. So he is a prominent threat throughout this story. He's a memorable threat, and I love him, man. I would love to see more of this Mr. Mumblety-Peg character in some maybe full-length novels or extended universe stuff that Tim Curran does. Yeah, this is one I recommend. It's a great story, an R-rated version of Beetlejuice, if that interests you. So yeah, very good one. The next one goes into a wicked Wild West story, and this one is called Skinning the Devil. Skinning the Devil is a short story which is from a book called Weird Trails, which I think only has 4 reviews on Goodreads, which makes it very obscure. Actually, I don't even think it has reviews. I think it's actually just 4 ratings and 0 reviews. So this is a very obscure book. This one again takes place in the Wild West, and you open up in a saloon bar with a bunch of different guys basically drinking and talking and interacting with each other before this sort of legendary figure in town walks in and takes a seat. He's this very old veteran type of guy. He's scarred up, but he's your typical old badass. You know, everybody knows that he's a war veteran. He's gone mining in various different towns. He's been a bounty hunter. He's been a cowboy, a gunslinger. He's been all around different places. And he's just a hard knocks, tough as nails dude that everybody believes when he's telling stories, because this is not the type of guy to lie, no matter how ridiculous the tales he might tell. And as he hears these guys basically telling, you know, long tales and sort of bullshit stories, he decides to tell his own story. And this story is so wild, so crazy, that nobody would really believe him. But because of his reputation and what he's done so far, in terms of his legendary status, they decide to all sit down and start listening to him. And this is a story about how he managed to basically get into an encounter with the devil and how it ended up going really, really insane and costing a lot of people's lives. The story basically opens up with him going to take a silver mining trip, basically an opportunity with one of his best friends and a Native American who has great tracking skills. So they end up trying to basically take this long road hike on burros and horses to this mining town to go get some money and opportunities and resources. And as they're passing by through this treacherous journey, they end up passing by this other Native American village. And this Native American village has a very ominous vibe behind it because everybody there seems to be in absolute paranoia. They seem to be in fear, and they seem to be whispering and talking about something very dangerous and ominous, some type of entity or figure coming down to the town. And it's simply referred to as the devil. They explain that the devil might be coming to their town. And you have people on top of their rooftops basically looking out towards the mountains, almost expecting something to come down there at night and basically ravage their village. And that leaves a very sort of ominous, scary, nervous feeling within this veteran dude, his best friend, and the other Native American, who seems to be kind of hiding some information, almost as if he's reluctant to share some stuff. But they end up continuing on and getting to the silver mining town where this veteran dude's best friend's brother is staying at and kind of running operations. When they get there, however, it's an absolute bloodbath. It is a slaughter. It is a massacre because you have dozens upon dozens of corpses involving humans, burros, and horses that got viciously ripped apart, gutted, shredded. And there's this disgusting, like a pneumonic, just nasty, horrific smell that smells worse than death that is plaguing this entire massacre scene. And it really does feel like some type of entity came in and just committed absolute carnage, because the destruction that happened to these, horses and burros and people is nothing like what a human could do. And some of these corpses of horses, burros, and humans are basically slung up on like 20-foot tall cactuses. So there's no way a human could have done this. And that's when the Native American basically starts getting maniacal, losing his mind, absolutely going crazy. And he ends up calling over the veteran dude and his best friend to go look at something. And when he points down what they should look at, they end up seeing this basically meter-long, foot-wide, giant footprint that looks like that of a velociraptor. I mean, it's got 3 toes, these giant sort of talon-like hooks, and they understand that this was definitely some type of creature or entity that caused all of this carnage. And that's when the Native American dude basically starts pointing up to the mountains that those other Native American villagers were paranoid about. And he basically describes to them that this was the work of a thunderbird. A thunderbird in Native American legend is basically this gigantic bird with the flap of his wings can basically cause thunderstorms. It rains carnage. It's said to be this mythical type of creature. And all of a sudden, these guys are like, okay, this dude might be bullshitting us. But after seeing this footprint and seeing the carnage, there is absolutely no denying that there is something out there that caused all of this carnage. And it's most likely what this Native American guy is talking about. So that's when the veteran, the best friend, and the Native American basically decide that they're going to go try to get some revenge and hunt down this thunderbird within its territory of the high mountains. And that's where the story leads off. And oh boy, you will not be disappointed. It gets wild, it gets chaotic, it gets crazy. Some amazing creature feature splatoozа. And yeah, this was an amazing Wild West tale. I give this one a 9 out of 10. It is a great story. And the ending gave off that typical sort of over-the-top Wild West vibe, but it was done in a great way. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. If you like darker Western stories, if you like creature features, if you like violent, descriptive gore, and just great, vivid, horrific scenes described in detail that will leave you basically shocked and feeling like you're immersed within that setting, Tim Curran is definitely the guy to deliver that. And finally, the last story is one that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this was my favorite story out of the ones that I read so far. And because this story was one that I found fantastic, I absolutely loved it. It was genius in its execution and idea. I'm going to save it for like a full-length review, separate video on it later in the future. But this one was called Embryo by Tim Curran. Embryo by Tim Curran is an extraterrestrial space story, and this one was featured in an anthology collection with a fantastic title that's called Midnight Beyond the Stars. This one feels like something that should have been featured within Alien Horrors, an honorary 13 story, and it is fantastic. This one is about a group of space voyagers out on a spaceship deep within the cosmos, and they're by this sort of Procreon sort of galaxy system, and they're outside of this very ominous, creepy, giant blue-black planet that is sort of uninhabitable. There's no life on there. They're on the spaceship and sort of monitoring it because they got this deep space rig to go on there, sort of probe it and mine out some resources after some previous unsuccessful attempts. And the man who's in charge of operating the communication system and monitoring it has a very sort of weird feeling about this planet. He has these strange feelings that as he's monitoring it on the screen and alone with it, that this planet is sort of calling to him in a way. It almost feels like it's looking at him and piercing through his soul and watching him 24/7. And when he turns on the sound system, which basically picks up and translates the planet's basically vibratory signals, the vibratory signals on this planet are very odd too. It almost sounds like, respiratory breathing. At some points, it feels like it has a heartbeat, and it almost feels like it's sort of kind of a living entity in a way. And although this sounds really crazy, although it sounds very Lovecraftian and sort of like he's kind of losing his mind and getting paranoid, which is what the other crewmates are starting to feel, as the story starts to unfold, you get more and more hints that there really might be something more going on to this planet than meets the eye. And even other crewmates start getting paranoid. And one time, one of the engineers basically tells him a story about how one of the previous unsuccessful attempts to get resources from this planet was actually a warship of 50 crewmates who had basically crash landed on the planet and got stranded on there, and they sent out this SOS distress signal where they were basically telling them that some entity on the planet had called them down, and now they're getting picked off one by one. And that's where that distress signal basically ended off. And after he gets that story, he then starts getting this very seductive otherworldly voice in his head that is commanding for a blood sacrifice, for one of the crewmates on the ship to be sacrificed, and how the things that are going to happen are essentially inevitable. And this man is simply a pawn, and there is some greater purpose that is being held for him. And that's where I'm going to leave it. This story starts getting very crazy, very brutal, very disturbing, as, you know, there's some horrific dream sequences, which may have more than meets the eye to them. There then starts being some very violent, horrific deaths of people, where you find out that whatever is involved with this ominous blue-black planet, that it may or may not be able to access this ship from all these thousands of miles away at any point that it wants to, or even drag people from the ship on its planet. And the climax ending to this story is absolutely batshit fucking crazy. It is insane, and it will actually boggle your mind. Like, my jaw literally dropped as I got to the end of the story, and I'm not exaggerating. It is one of the most creative, one of the most insane extraterrestrial space sci-fi horror stories that I ever read. You will not read any shit like this, and it will really make you start to think about what might be out there in the cosmos and how insignificant we are to some of the threats that are lurking out there in the midnight beyond the stars. But yeah, The Embryo by Tim Curran gets a 9.5 out of 10. Absolutely fantastic story, and it just shows that he really is the master of sci-fi horror, Lovecraftian horror, water horror, and strangely all three of those fields sort of work together, and that's really sort of his bread and butter and his forte. He does other things well as well, you know, as I can tell by some of the other stories that I described. But oh man, dude, this dude is an absolute genius when it comes to those three subtopics. Yeah, man, Tim Curran, always a treat. And that's all I got for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and comment down below. Have you read any of these stories before? What are your thoughts about some of these stories? What are some short stories that you recommend? And yeah, stay tuned, stay classy. Hope you guys have an amazing, blessed day. And I hope to see you next time, whenever that is. And of course, have a great day. Make sure to always look out into the night sky and wonder what's really out there. Always got to leave you on an ominous, creepy note. Deuces.